For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, we are live and amplified. So let's get ready to podcast.
Fire it up.
Welcome, everybody, to another live and amplified livecast. I'm your host, Tom Quiet, and we are back at it again with another amazing podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Robert Andrew Wagner of the Wretches. How's it going today, Robert?
You did that. He's going to stumble over Wretches. He's going to, but you got it. First attempt. Very good.
See, that's why I like doing it live, because for whatever reason in my head, when I know it's live and I only got one shot at it, I'm less likely to stumble. Whereas if this was just recorded and it wasn't live, so to speak, then I'd take me 2 or 3 tries just to get it right. And
hey, that happens with music too. You just kind of know that once you get on stage, everything's going to go right. Or once you get in the studio and okay, it's time to cut the song. I know it. Yep, we're ready.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and it's like you could run it in your head as much as you want and stumble and stumble and stumble. But once that mic turns on and the light turns green or red, whatever you want to call it, you know, it's just showtime. Time to go. So, Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to have you here. Talk a little bit about music, what you got going on and all that fun stuff. I know we've been interacting on social media. It feels like pretty good portion of the pandemic. I've seen you pop around the Facebook group and whatnot a few times, so I'm really excited to actually sit down and chat with you.
Yeah, well, I've been looking forward to it for quite a while too. I wondered if it was ever going to happen. I'm glad it has.
Yeah, it's because I think we had one scheduled last year at some point, but that was when I was going through the whole personal situation. I don't know if I ever filled you in on that, but I was dealing with some stuff with my mom, and she was diagnosed with cancer and whatnot. So last year was a rough year for the podcast, to say the least. So
yeah. Well, it's life throws those things at you, you know. And you got to do when it happens. You got to do what's right. You know, you can't. So
yeah, I took like a good 6 weeks off the or after everything kind of unfolded and happened. I took a good 6 weeks off, and there was a couple of points where I was like, I kind of want to get back into it, but I knew that it just wasn't going to be right. So I waited until first of the year, and here we are.
Yeah. Well,
so
welcome back. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. But really excited to chat with you a little bit. Before we kind of jump into the Wretches and everything you got going on there, let's take a step back and give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, and for like the people that are just getting to meet you for the first time, like what's your comic book origin story number 1?
Oh no, well, you know, I'm one of those kids. You know, back when I was growing up, people didn't go to daycare centers and stuff like that. You know, you stayed with friends or cousins, you know, so I had this big network of cousins, most of whom were older than me, and they all had good record collections. You know, for us, when we would play, there would always be a little children's turntable with a bunch of old scratchy 45s and stuff. So we grew up, I mean, I just always had music when I was growing up. And my cousin, who's a little bit older than me, said, you know, the Beatles are the best band because they write their own songs. I was like, oh, well, let's write some songs then. You know, we got plywood and 2x4s and rubber bands and tried to make guitars. And, you know, the adults joked with us, oh, then you need to get a recording contract. Like, well, how do you do that? Like, well, you got to get a record company. So we would get the records, and we'd read the labels and, you know, write letters to the record companies saying, we want a record contract. You know, of course, never got a call back, and never. But I've always, I mean, all I ever wanted to do was be in a band and play music. And you know, you mentioned your mom had cancer. I'd pretty much resigned myself to having to be a poet or something. You know, because you know, how do you have a band? But you know, I got cancer when I was like a freshman in college, and at the time, I was really lucky. The doctors that I went to an emergency room, and the doctors just turned out to be these young guys that were on the cutting edge of research. And the kind of cancer I had, there were professors going to my friends, giving them books on grief counseling because your buddy's not going to make it. And my doctor's like, oh, no. We got this new stuff. It's going to work. But in fact, it was on the night before the Super Bowl, which, was right around the corner. Me and my roommate, who was really a really talented musician, we just looked at each other. It's like, man, all I ever wanted to do was have a band. Let's start a band. And that was it, So every year, the night before the Super Bowl, I try to have a nice little gig because, turning point in my life. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And, when you're a musician, sometimes you got to get a side job here, do what you got to do to keep a roof over your head. For me, I'm in education. I'm just kind of, it's easy for me to hang out with kids and, call myself a teacher. So every time there was a slow point in my career, I'd go back and take a few more classes. Next thing you know, I had a master's degree, and they give you money to hang out with kids, and they tell you it's a hard job, and it's not.
Yeah. Where did you go to school to get your master's?
University of Pittsburgh. I mean, I'm a Pittsburgher. I bleed black and gold. I will be repping the 412 for forever. I live out, I'm a Pennsylvania guy, but in Pittsburgh, a guy named Brian O'Neill, I think his name is, wrote a book called The Paris of Appalachia. And that's really what Pittsburgh is. Pittsburgh is not Midwest. Pittsburgh is not East Coast. It's, it's like the top of the Appalachian Mountains, and that's where everybody from all backgrounds moved, for the industry that was there. And it was a real melting pot, a really hardcore people. I think we drink more coffee than any place in the world. We iron our clothes more than any place in the world because we take pride in the way we look. And I think we eat more baked beans than anybody else in the world, too.
Probably. So since you brought up that you're a diehard Pittsburgh till the day you die, and you brought up football, how did you feel when Big Ben announced his retirement a few weeks ago?
Well, a lot of people. Well, he went out as the best player on the team, So most of us would love to have him back, but it's time to open some new doors and a new era to begin. Yeah. I was not always a fan of him. In fact, there was a time when he was involved in some scandals earlier in his career. I refused to speak his name. I would refer to him as number 7, the quarterback. I was so upset with him. But he ended up going to the same church as my sister and turns out to be a pretty good guy.
Yeah. I remember when all that went down. I was in college when all that went down, and that was a pretty interesting time. It's funny because that whole draft class was the first year that I could remember actually being interested in football in general. I just remember watching the draft and watching Big Ben get drafted. And I'm from Chicago. I'm a Chicago Bears fan, just for transparency.
Oh, so yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And so I just remember Big Ben, and then when I saw him play for the first time, I was like, oh, he's really good. And then, of course, he went on to win as much as he has. So.
The first football game he ever lost. I mean, look, you got me on the Steelers. Oh, no. But
that's all good.
He never lost a football game till he was a pro.
Yeah.
Pee-wee football never lost a game. High school football never lost a game. College football never lost a game. I mean, and anybody was from a small college, so there were some people saying, "Oh, but he's playing against bad competition. He'll never make it in the NFL." Nah, that guy's a winner all the way.
Yeah.
And a competitor, And
a big
dude. Try to tackle that guy.
Yeah. Up until a few years ago, I had a Big Ben jersey just because when I was in high school, my computer science teacher knew somebody that worked at I think it was a Reebok printer. And so all the blemished ones, she'd sell to him.
Oh.
And so it would be like, oh, hey, do you want this Big Ben jersey? I'll sell it to you for $20. And like, we're talking like the authentic jerseys, like legit authentic, you know?
Yeah.
And he was like, here, I paid 15, I'll sell it to you for 20. And I'm like, all right, cool.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that stuff goes for big bucks.
yeah, for sure, for sure. But, you know, it was a time in my life where it's like, you know what? Let's go for it. So,
Yeah.
but, so I brought up football for a reason, because you'd mentioned that since you got diagnosed young with cancer, every year you kind of try and play a show right before the Super Bowl. Have you been able to do that the last few years with the?
I think it was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I've lost track of time. It's been so weird. Right before the lockdown, we did a really, really good show at a club in Pittsburgh called Moondogs. You know, it's in like the International Blues Hall of Fame. It's mainly a blues club, but I used to run a songwriter series there. The owner, a real supporter of music. So the Little Wretches, and there's this other great band. So they're kind of like progressive bluegrass. They're called Devilish Mary. If you ever get a chance to come to discover Devilish Mary's music. So we did a double bill the night before the Super Bowl. Huge turnout. Everybody was psyched. Okay, when are we going to do this again? You know, a couple of months later, we were on hold for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a couple of months, and next thing you know, oh, dang, it's never coming back. And now, you know, I think I'm a couple years older than you. Like in the Philadelphia area.
Not that much. You're not that much older than me.
The songwriters community out here, they're so lazy. I mean, in Pittsburgh, we wanted to take over the world all the time. But out here in Philly, they're like happy to do Zoom meetings. It's almost like, oh, good, we don't have to go out. Oh, man. My dream has always been, you know, I want to wake up in the morning thinking about where I'm playing tonight. And I don't want it to be in front of a laptop in my bedroom, you know?
Yeah, fair. That's fair. You know, I will say, though, I have really enjoyed working remotely. Like, that's just because I enjoy being able to wake up 5 minutes before work and being on time.
Yeah, well, yeah, I get that. But you know, from the music standpoint, I can only imagine. I mean, like anybody who's in the performing arts, okay, like if you're in television or you're in drama, you know, you're used to shooting things, and you know, okay, now it's time to get the close up and all that. But if you're a live performer, so much of your, you know, it's timing and it's interaction with the audience, and it's like reading really subtle cues, and I mean, that's where the real, you know, connection comes in is you know, when you're live. I mean, especially for me, with our band, we would never go out with a set list. We say we have a repertoire, and we're going to play it the way we feel it in the moment. Maybe we'll play a little faster, maybe a little bit slower. We might even change the key, but we're going to call the tunes based on the vibe. You know, what do we need right now? And you know, depending on who our performing ensemble is, you know, because you know, we can play with a 6-piece, can play with a 2-piece, but it'd be like, okay, a song strikes you, just start it, you know. Don't stand around and say, what do you want to play next? Man, just start the tune. We'll know what it is and we'll jump in. And it's a magic moment, and it can only be live, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Since you brought up the Little Wretches and playing live shows, what's kind of the history of the Little Wretches?
Well, okay, you know, I mentioned that I didn't think that, you know, I didn't know anybody. Nobody in my family was involved in music. You know, it's interesting how many people even in sports or the arts, their parents, you know, you find out, oh, his dad was an actor, you know, so, but nobody in my family was involved in the performing arts. So how do you get in? So, I mean, I would practice my guitar and write 8 hours a day, but then, you know, punk rock happened. You know, I was in college, and I just was in the right place at the right time where I could connect with people who said, hey, there's a new club and they're looking for bands and I can put you on the show, and what are you guys going to call yourselves? So my first band, which I started with my roommate, people think of punk rock as like mohawks and leather jackets and ripped clothes and everything, but it was really very, very free. You didn't have to be experienced, didn't have to necessarily even be talented, but it was artistically across the board, very creative and not all locked into one style. And then once I figured out that I'm a good lyricist, I'm a good songwriter, but it doesn't come across with all that volume, right? You're putting out so much information and people can't hear it over the noise. So I think of like No Shelter, and that punk scene was like an apprenticeship where I figured out, okay, this is what I'm good at. Now I got to figure out how to put it together so that what I do comes across. And so my brother was just, getting out of high school. He played violin. So, went to the library, got a bunch of books about folk music, Johnny Cash. And so, because thinking we have to have some kind of way to tell the audience this, an olive branch to the audience. Yes, we're doing original music, but here's a way to frame it. We're telling stories, and we're going to have certain melodic elements, certain narrative elements, and we got something. I'm going to say something that nobody else is going to say. Leave our characters in your dreams, So when we started out, it was really rinky-dink. My brother on violin. I didn't even have an acoustic guitar. I was playing a Gibson Melody Maker. Our bass player played an electric bass. And we had these two guys. They were like Gladys Knight and the Pips. They both played flute. One guy played a soprano sax, but they would bang on stuff and do like doo-wop vocals, like Beach Boys vocals, and it was really exciting. People loved us, but we were so weird. Where could we play? A new art gallery is opening. Oh, the Little Wretches can play at an art gallery opening, but we wanted to play in clubs. So we had to turn into a regular. So like the more mainstream we got, we kind of lost. So it's always been back and forth, and now I'm a little bit like the Three Little Pigs. Whatever tools I have, I got my thing. I'll work with it with whatever tools are at my disposal. So I can play a lot of shows just solo, acoustic, duo shows, or when we get the opportunity to play full band shows. That would be the ideal, but. The logistics of it these days are hard to put together. So mainly for about the last 10 years, it's me and my guitar.
Yeah, for sure. And then when you do get those full shows, or the more than just you, I guess, do you have like a certain group that you turn to, or is it just kind of whoever's available?
Well, there's been a couple of different, like, really solid generations of the band. Mm-hmm. There was a version with the piano player Dave Losey, who was also a great songwriter, and Ellen Hildebrand, who's also a good songwriter, and just has some kind of spirit or soul that she brings to the stage. So that's one version of the band that sometimes perform, and then there's the version of the band that recorded Undesirables and Anarchists. The drummer's the same guy. But it's the bass player and the vocalist. That's a little bit different. The piano player, the bass player for this version of the band, John Carson. We're working on an album right now. It's supposed to come out on March 2nd, but we're still tweaking the mixes. So we could miss our deadline, but. I do my thing. I present the song to the musicians, and it's like, I'm not going to tell you what to play. I'll tell you if I don't like what you're doing. Yeah. But bring your thing to the table. I want you to express your thing through my songs. And John Carson's bass playing on this new album is so imaginative and so perfect. And the writing. Can I tell you about the new album?
Yeah.
Okay,
we were going to get to it in a little bit, but we'll jump to it now.
Well, yeah, I've kind of like been working on these songs for a long time. And even some of the, I used to publish poetry, so I took some poems that I published, way, way long time ago when I was in college and set them to music. And we've been working on this because we did it in the COVID era.
Yeah.
They're all in Pittsburgh. I'm out here in Philly. So
yeah.
I present the songs to them, but when we're rehearsing over a Zoom meeting,
yeah.
I have to turn the audio off because there's like a couple of second delay.
Yeah.
So I can play, they can hear me, but I can't even hear what he's doing. So I don't even know what they're going to play until we're in the studio, and we get in there and record it, and it was great.
Yeah.
But it's the finishing touches. Like the last album we recorded, we went and we recorded it live in the studio. This new one, like, okay, when can I get back to Pittsburgh? When is the studio available? When is everybody healthy? Oh, we got to cancel this session because somebody has COVID. Oh, we have to cancel this session because so and so was exposed and now they got a quarantine. So here it is. We started working on the project last January, and here it is January.
Yeah.
Last day of January, and we're still trying to finish the dang thing. It's going to be great.
At least you're making headway on it. Like, and it's like you've got everything recorded. You're on the final mixes, so
yeah. It's one of those things, where look, you never know how the audiences are going to perceive it, but I mean, I just kind of know. I mean, I believe. I mean, I love it. I love it. The songs, a lot of them are real character based. They're about sick people, crazy people, old people, and alone people. But it's really more. It's not so much about, because that sounds kind of depressing.
Yeah.
But it's really about the spirit, the humor, the life that just keeps them going. Nothing's going to stop them. Nothing's going to keep them down.
Yeah.
And so it's really about. The durability, the endurance, the triumph of the human spirit, and the faith, it's so I think it's fun and funny, and I hope people like it, but I know we've done something good with this album.
For sure. What went into the song selection process for this album?
Well, I've been putzing around with the songs. I had a couple of centerpieces. There's a song called Duquesne. Duquesne is like a river town outside of Pittsburgh that used to be a steel town.
Yeah.
And now it's so poor that they don't even have their own school district.
Oh, wow.
And, but there's a lady that, she's worked all of her life, and now she's past retirement age, so they've forced her to retire. But she gets up in the morning and she gets on the bus just like she's going to work, but instead of going to work, she sits in the church all day. And when it's time to go home from work, she gets back on the bus and goes home, and then, certain days of the week she knows her daughter's going to call. And so that's like this one of the centerpieces of, because I can perform it acoustic, and I know, like, especially if people haven't heard it before, it's like, oh man, that's a great song. So I have a couple of those. There's a song, there's a poet friend of mine. I just walked into a bar, and they were having a poetry reading, and this woman named Annette Dietz read this poem called Winter's Grace. And I said, man, that was a great poem. It had the line, some days the best I can do is clear a path for light. And I said, oh, that's a great line. I want to build a song around that line. And I just approached her right after the poetry reading. She hands me the poem, says, do what you want with it. So that's one of the songs on this. But there were a couple of pieces missing, and then they just kind of came, So now, and it's one of those old-fashioned concept albums. It's about 60 minutes of music, and you're supposed, if you listen to the whole thing, and I hope everybody will at least once, it's solid, but I have all the faster paced songs towards the end, because like I found myself, because I'll listen to the mixes in my car, maybe after 20 minutes, it's like, okay, I've heard enough.
Yeah.
But no, if you want people to listen, stick with it all the way. You got to give them a change of pace. You got to give them a reason to stay on board, so the energy level actually grows. But you know, each song works on its own too. I mean, I know not everybody. It's like going to the movie Taxi Driver. There's a lot of powerful scenes in it, and it's a long movie. But if you watch the whole movie, it's worth the time. But you're not going to watch it. You know, music. You need a hit song. You want people to stream your song 100 times a day. You know, this is more like an album that you'll listen to once every couple of years, but you'll have a couple of favorite songs that maybe you'll play a lot. Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. Have you given the new album a title yet, or is that still kind of in works?
Yeah, well, I mean, and this is kind of weird too. There's a couple of, it's called Red Beets and Horseradish.
Okay.
Which I don't know if you've ever eaten red beets and horseradish, but you know, there's a lot of Eastern European people in the Pittsburgh area, and my family on my mother's side, they're Slovakian, and so every like Easter season, they would make this, like they minced or diced, you know, really ground up red beets with horseradish for flavoring. Yeah. And I always liked it. And so one day I tried to find a recipe on the internet, and I found out that actually has, you know, for some ethnicities, it has religious symbolism, and for some ethnicities, it's like, I think for the Serbians, it's the blood of our people and the bitterness of our suffering. And for a lot of the other, you know, ethnicities, it's the blood of our Savior and the bitterness of his suffering. And then for the Jews, it's just the blood's just for flavor. You know, the blood's just for flavor. There is no blood. They don't consume blood, so the beets are just for flavoring. But the horseradish is the bitterness of their suffering. So that's the symbolic thing. And then, you know, from like the musical side, it's roots. You know, what's our beet is a root. Yep. What's horseradish? And it's not, you know, not to everybody. A lot of people think beets taste like dirt. I happen to like them, and I've eaten a little bit of dirt in my time too. So I think, you know, it has like that rootsy music angle to it, and it has the symbolic thing, and like, you know, it's about people who've suffered and struggled and you know, will not quit.
I think any kid that was born prior to like 95 has eaten dirt at some point in their life.
Yeah.
Just my opinion. Don't crucify me if you disagree. But
well, I heard down in the South, there's some place where like there's, I don't know if it's in Georgia. I had a friend that I used to work with. She said down there's a certain kind of clay that you could like just to get a little pinch of it. It's just so good, a little bit sour, and it's like yeah. Well, I want to get down there and taste that dirt someday.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd willingly eat dirt at this point in my life, but you know.
I'm so gullible. I remember when I was a kid, my sister and her friends were making mud pies, and I said, "They're not really pies." And they said, "Yes, they are. They're pies. Would you want?" And then they convinced me, you know, since it was a pie and you eat pie, I took a bite out of one of their mud pies. Ooh, how could you do that to a kid?
Yeah, that's, yeah, I got you. So, I'm kind of curious now to find out about what's kind of the difference between this new album and Undesirables and Anarchists. Is there kind of a...
Well, Undesirables and Anarchists, when we recorded that, we that was basically our live set. And, you know, and since we'd been doing the Little Wretches for a while, some of the songs had even been recorded but not released in other versions. So the arrangements had been like road tested.
Yeah.
And we could play this stuff in our sleep. And it's a little bit. Have you seen the Beatles documentary Get Back? And you see them in the studio playing.
I've seen parts of it. I haven't seen the whole thing yet.
Well, one of the things that's amazing to me is, you know, when you go into a recording studio, everybody tells you how you have to do it, and then there's the Beatles sitting around in a semicircle with their amps in the same room and a little PA system, and they're recording live in the studio and rehearsing live in the studio. So we were perfectly. We had this material nailed, and the engineer said, "Hey man, if you guys can record this stuff without headphones, if you could just set up like you're doing a live show and overdub the vocals later, just cut the rhythm tracks. By the time you're done setting up, I'll be ready to track. So he used a lot of overhead mics. So make yourself sound the way you want to sound in the room, and that's how I'm going to get it on the tape. And it did. So then I doubled all the guitars, all the electric guitars. I doubled them on an acoustic guitar, which was overdubbed, and I did most of my vocals one take with Rosa singing. We're kind of facing each other, and we just nailed it. And it just, yeah. A lot of times in the studio, what you'll do is you record a track, and then if you make a mistake, you go back and punch in just to fix the one note that you missed. We didn't flub any notes. I mean, we played it perfectly. We'll never play that well again. This go round, we were not well rehearsed.
Yeah.
We rehearsed over Zoom.
Yeah.
We didn't know what the other guy was going to play. So while I'm recording in the studio, I'm concentrating so hard on not making mistakes on my part that I'm not even really listening to what the bass player's playing.
Yeah.
I don't understand till the playback is like, oh my God, that's a great bass part. How did you think of that?
Yeah.
So a completely different experience. And then, there's with Undesirables and Anarchists, we knew how we sounded live, and that's how we wanted to sound. With this, we're still kind of discovering this, how the songs should best go together. And the engineer that we're working with, since he's heard it in all these layers, he can't read my mind. He doesn't know what it's supposed to sound like. He doesn't know if this is a lead instrument or this is a supporting instrument. So, but it's the magic of the creative process, people. Imagine how cool it would be to be a recording engineer that worked with, because everybody, when you go into the studio, you're sure that what you're doing is the most important thing in the history of the world.
Yep.
And then the next band that comes in, they feel the exact same way. Like, man, to be around that much passion and that much energy every day. I get up, I go to work, and I'm surrounded by really driven, talented people. That's a good life.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Now, throughout your musical career, have you studied like engineering and stuff? Have you started to take an interest into the production aspect of things, or are you just 100% focused on music?
No, I don't have the one. That's a discipline in and of itself. You never hear yourself, like I might be able to produce somebody else's, and look, I'm the official producer of my records, but the way I have to do it is I have to get really good people who I could say, okay, set me up what you think is a mix, and then I'll tweak it. I'll give you suggestions.
Yeah.
But I've listened to so many scratchy records and bootleg recordings and audience recordings, and I'm perfectly happy with the outtakes. I hear, when bands release their outtakes and their bloopers and the stuff that didn't make the official albums. Like, man, I usually like that stuff better than the official release. So, I don't listen. I'm listening for the energy and the spirit inside it. But it does help with somebody who understands industry standards and knows how to turn the knobs to get the effect. I just don't have the patience for that. That's not my thing. That would be a discipline in itself. Like, what are you going to be? You're going to be a doctor? You're going to be a lawyer? No, I'm going to be a sound engineer. That's not for me. I can write some songs. I got to devote myself to the writing and the guitar playing.
That makes sense. 100% makes sense, because it's been interesting since the pandemic. You've seen a lot of musicians starting to taking an interest in production isn't the right word, but having to learn how to record vocal scratch tracks and stuff of that nature. So having to learn basics just to keep their musical aspirations alive because they can't get into the studio or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, it's the technology. It's leveled the playing field, in some ways. So if you're an indie artist, somebody on the other side of the world is just a couple of clicks away from your music. So anybody can find it, but then also anybody can make it. A 15-year-old with a laptop can make a record that sounds as good as, the Beatles' White Album. So there was another era where just making going into a professional recording studio was like a sign of commitment. Going on the road with your band was a sign of commitment, and people tended to they give you a pass. It's like you don't have to prove yourself. You've already proven yourself by the fact that you're here. But now anybody can get in the game. And which is still why I like to perform live, because not everybody can, not all those kids making their records can perform live or playing with backing tracks. That's acceptable now. You go to a club and there's people playing with backing tracks, like, and you're looking around and their friends are happy to hear that. Yeah. Come on, you wouldn't even be able to get away with that at a talent show at high school when I was growing up.
Like there's been a couple of situations where I've heard, I've got two stories on this. So there's been a couple of situations where I've heard a band having to put in a backing track, but they do it in a way where they're like using it. Basically, a musician wasn't able to make it that night, and so they had to have the backing track, which was kind of unfortunate. But if you're a full band and your bass player can't make it, you kind of got to do what you got to do, Yeah. But, it's one of those situations where it's just like, oh, that sucks, but I get it. But then a few years ago, I went to a hip hop show, like an independent hip hop show, and it was basically all these artists except one guy. They basically all put their CD in and just ad-libbed over their CD. So basically, it was just like track 1 through 12, and then them just doing ad libs over it, and I'm like,
well, if their ad libs are good, though, I mean, it's possible that somebody can really make something happen like that.
But it's one of those things where it's like, I came to watch you perform, not just listen to your album, because I could have done that for free at the house, not paid $20 to get in,
Yeah.
So I hate being like that, but in when it comes to money, it's like, whatever. So
yeah.
But
and if you're like a knowing listener too, there are artists that'll sneak in those backing tracks. You're like, oh, wait a second, I hear strings.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody playing them.
Yeah.
And it's not coming from the keyboard.
Yeah.
They're pretty sly.
I will say, though, I really do, like, since the pandemic hit, I've been watching musicians do their Twitch streams, like doing their Twitch live shows. And the live loopers that basically have, like, the effects pedals and they build their beat or build their instrumental as they go, that's a really cool art form. Just kind of watching them construct their...
Yeah. I've seen people do that pretty good. I used to play in the Little Wretches. We had on the live acoustic album that we put out last year, it was just me and a violin player. But the violin player's name's Dave Mond. He was actually a cellist, and he was going up and down the West Coast. He could ride a unicycle, and he could do portraits with like felt tip pens. So he was living completely off the grid, and he could busk with his cello. And somebody stole his cello. So somebody at a violin shop out there, because he's such a talented guy, they gave him a violin, but he played it. He used to get a fanny pack, and he would play the violin upright, like a cello.
Yeah.
And everything double stops. So completely unique guy. And when he had his cello, when he was playing with me, he had one of those loopers, and he would set up, he would basically be doing a duet with himself, or if I have a lot of songs, since I founded the band with my brother, who was a violin player, who passed away as it turned out, but a lot of the songs would be written around these repetitive violin lines. So what the cello player could do is he could play that line, make a loop of it, and then improvise over it. Yeah, you can do amazing stuff with the technology, but it's still, you're making it happen. It's not like popping a CD in and playing along with a CD.
Yeah, correct. You're right, 100% right. So.
And then the guys, they do the rhythm too. They'll do like the clicks on their guitars.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things kind of going on in the music world right now, especially during the pandemic, and people have had to get creative and kind of do their own thing. But I 100% agree with you. One thing that'll never be, or rarely be acceptable. I'm not going to say never be acceptable, is playing a backing track. It's yeah. If you can't recreate it live, then yeah, I get it. So anyways, so kind of moving forward, you're working on the new album. Do you have a Super Bowl show booked this year, or is it still kind of...
it's still out here. It's really dicey. You know, look, this whole pandemic thing has been really divisive from like a political standpoint, and people have really strong opinions about things. There's things that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, like a lot of the places out here. When that Omicron variant hit, all the shows got canceled. So my first official show that is booked is March the 5th, and everything in February got canceled. But now that things are starting to open up, you know, there's a lot of kind of cool places with open dates on their calendar. So I think it's February 12th is the Super Bowl. So the Saturday night before that, which is just a couple of weeks away, there's a couple of pretty cool places that I think I'm going to be able to do it. The problem is in Philadelphia proper, I think you actually have to show a vaccine card to get in, or proof of a test. Like, man, I am not asking people who come to hear me play to show me anything. You know, if they want to give me money, I'll accept the money. But I'm not. I mean, I have a hard time with that. But yeah, it's really throwing a monkey wrench into everything. Because I thought, you know, there was a time even last year where I thought we were coming back. Okay, we're ready to go. Yeah. And then there's just one thing after another. And out here, like the political vibe in Philly proper is a lot different than in the regions where I am. Yeah. And even in Western Pennsylvania, even in the thick of the pandemic when everybody was supposed to be masked, I went to this little place in the Laurel Highlands. It was called the Coal Miner Diner. Okay. I thought, a coal miner diner sounds cool with me. I go in there because I'm basically making the drive from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, and I want to stop and get something to eat. I pull into the Coal Miner Diner, and it looks like they have sit-down dining. Yeah. And I go in, and they do. They have sit-down dining, and I'm wearing a mask, and everybody looks at me like, "What's that thing on your face?" Like, you mean you're not afraid to catch COVID and die? But no, they weren't afraid. You know, coal miners aren't afraid of nothing. Oh no, you know? Yeah. So and then out here, one morning, it was a Sunday morning, and I just had the hankering for an omelet. Yeah. So I thought there's got to be a place with takeout. So I'm driving around. There's a little diner that I liked. I said, I'm going to go down that diner and I'm going to get an omelet with lox and onions and, you know, all the smelly, tasty stuff. Yeah. And I'm driving down the street. I see a restaurant with a line of people up the sidewalk. Like, wait a second. They must they must be waiting to dine in at that place. They're certainly not going to wait like that. So I get to my little diner. And, you know, I order my omelet, and they say, you know, it's only takeout, but you can wait here if you want. And then this couple, they get out of their car, and they're like a million years old, and they're walking with walkers. Yeah. And they get up, and when they get inside, the proprietor tells them takeout only, and they look at each other. Well, a Limerick diner has sit down, and they hobbled back to their car and drove away. And I thought to myself, the Limerick diner has sit down? So when I ate my little omelet in my car and drove up to the Limerick diners, lo and behold, there's a full parking lot and people eating. So while they're doing it with no fear and just going on with life in general, on the other side of town, there's people that 6 feet social distance isn't enough for them. One mask isn't enough for them. I mean, they're terrified.
Yeah.
And I'm a cancer survivor. I ain't scared of getting cold. You know, come on, man.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's one of those things, not to go too far into the political spectrum on things, but I do like when it's just like, all right, let the businesses decide what they want to do. If they want you masked up and all that stuff, okay, fine. If I really need to go to this place, or I really want to go to this place, at that point I'll decide, okay, I'm going to mask up or I'm not. Yeah. But if they don't want you to, you know, they can't force you to mask up. They can't force you not to mask up. So
I went to the Pittsburgh Symphony, and you had to show your vaccine card to get in. You know, most of their audience, you know, at the symphony, they're all I mean, I don't mean to be mean about this, but they're elderly, and you know, they're probably in that. You know, if me wearing a mask and being vaccinated makes it possible for them to go to the symphony and enjoy a night out, yeah, I'll gladly do it. But I'm personally, I don't care. I'm not afraid. I think I had the flu in 1993. I'm not going to get sick. I don't get sick, you know.
100% understood. I got you. I know where you're coming from, and we'll just kind of see how things go over the next year. Yeah. But
well, hopefully this is the wave that gets everybody their immunity. Because you know, I've played a few shows and it's fun. I want to do it more.
I went to I've been to a couple of, well, not this year. I haven't been to a show yet this year, but the last year, towards the end of the last year, when I got back from Florida after spending time with my family while my mom was sick, it was I went to a few shows, and those shows were just, nobody was worried about nothing. You know, it was like they were both I'm not going to call them heavy metal shows, but they were like heavy rock shows, and it was just a whole bunch of fun compared to the first show I went to out of the lockdown. I went to like a singer-songwriters thing at a local bar just on the street from where I live, and I went in there and everybody's just kind of, oh, I don't know, can I trust you? Can I trust you? Can I trust you? And as they're talking to you as they're backing up 6 feet, and it's like, really? Like, I don't know. It was, nobody knew how to act around each other. It was really weird. So
well, you know, as long, you know, well, back to a little bit of the political thing, you know, the what you hear and what the vibe you pick up from social media is so different than, you know, the data of my real life, the data of my going around, going to the store, going to the gas station, from the media, like even myself, I bought into it a little bit about how divided everything is. But the fact is, wherever you go, people figure out how to get along. You know, you look around, and what's the vibe here? How, you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. But people cope and get, you know, still a lot of humor, a lot of kindness. People doing what they have to do to, you know, put food in the kitchen and the roof over the head and gas in the tank. In that respect, I wish I could get away from the social media thing, because I said, man, life is good until you turn on the TV and they tell you it's not.
Yeah, I don't pay attention to half the social media. Like, I don't post on my personal page hardly that much, other than the occasional share of the Live and Amplified page. And then other than that, I'm not on social media like that anymore. I use it more to communicate directly with musicians and friends, like just as a direct message type thing. But other than that, yeah, I really don't check social media that often. So But
and I teach a little bit too. The kids are funny because they're aware that there's like maybe some crisis in the world, but all they want to do is look at memes and TikTok videos and laugh their lives away. Oh, come on! But it's serious. You're going to rule the world someday. Yeah, man. The world will rule itself. We're just going to have fun.
Yeah, it is what it is. They'll learn sooner or later. Like my generation figured out real quick.
Yeah. Well.
So, but anyways, it's been an absolute blast chatting with you. For kind of moving forward, you said hopefully right before Super Bowl you'll get something booked because things are starting to open up. But after that, you have March. You said as far as shows and whatnot.
Yeah, well, I've got a bunch of like solo, and then I'm performing with a woman out here, like the singer that you hear me with on the recordings is Rosa Colucci. She's a Pittsburgher, so when I'm out there, and even her, she's so busy. Just because I have a gig doesn't mean she can join me. Yeah. But I love doing that duet. So out here, Kim Alexander is singing harmonies with me. So probably most of the shows I'll be doing out here, I'll be doing with Kim, and then we have somebody who plays percussion and an upright bass. It's a good little combo. We can do most of the Little Wretches repertoire, and back in Pittsburgh, I have H.K. Hillner on piano, John Carson and Mike Madden. So we got our core little band. But as far as traveling, have guitar will travel. Like Steve Earle, the hardcore troubadour. I wish I could afford to bring a band with me, but people are not willing to pay that kind of money. And so,
gotcha, 100%. How far of a trip is it between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh?
No, I could do it in my sleep, but it's if I don't stop and I take the turnpike, I can do it in 4.5 hours.
Okay.
But the turnpike's so expensive.
Yeah.
So I know there's several roads that like cut across Pennsylvania. Some of them go over mountains and some of them wind around mountains, and they're scenic. So if you don't want to pay those tolls, that 4.5 hours turns into 6.5 hours. But I love to drive, man. Yeah. As long as I got good music to listen to, and there's always good music to listen to. And then you scheme how am I going to take over the world? Yep. How is our next album going to be the greatest thing ever made? Yeah. And that's all the stuff you can think about on those nice long drives.
For sure. That's my one favorite thing about driving. So I live in Waco, Texas, but a lot of my partners in Live and Amplified, they still live out in Roswell, New Mexico, where we kind of started this 6 years ago. And so now whenever I need to go visit with them, it's a 7.5 hour drive to Roswell, and there's an 1.5 hour time slot where none of my electronics work, like none of the internet, like there's no cell signal, no internet, no nothing, because you're like out in West Texas.
Wow.
Middle of nowhere, BFE, all that stuff. And just that 1.5 hours where it's like dead silent. I could probably turn on the radio if I wanted to, but I just sit there in silence for an 1.5 hours, let my brain kind of run away with itself of, we're going to take over the world, we're going to bring down the music industry, and we're going to give the power back to the independent musicians, like
that's what I was thinking myself.
Yeah, that's the hope. Every time I make that trip, an 1.5 hours of how are we going to take down the music business.
Well, you make the fight down in Waco, they make the fight out in Roswell, I'll do the fight up here in Philly, in Pottstown. There's people like us all across the country, all across the world. Yeah. We're going to do the work. We're going to fight the fight. We're going to make the music.
For sure. But once again, I do really appreciate you jumping on. I'm glad we were finally able to get the podcast up and running, because like I'd mentioned, we were scheduled to do this at some point last year, but with everything going on, it didn't end up working out. But if anybody wants to check out Undesirables and Anarchists, or the new album when it drops, where's the best place for them to check out your music, upcoming shows, interact with
our website is littlewretches.com, not the band is called The Little Wretches, but littlewretches.com is the best way. You know, look us up on Facebook. I mean, for social media mainly, we do Facebook. But, you know, there's all kinds of stuff out there on YouTube. I mean, you know, I have a modest little channel where I post like the Little Wretches lyric videos and stuff, but there's so much live footage. You know, just do an internet search. I mean, whatever you listen to, ladies and gentlemen, nothing against Spotify, but you got to stream one of our songs like 40,000 times for me to make $1. If you're a real fan, buy merchandise, purchase downloads, you know, get the real thing. That's real music lovers have music collections, and then they invite their friends over to enjoy the collection. You know, nothing against Spotify and all the streaming services, but you know, we make money when you buy our stuff. We don't make money when you stream our stuff. If you stream our stuff, we love you, we thank you, but come on. Be a real fan.
When I go to shows, the one thing I look for is vinyl. That's what I'm all about right now. It's because I know how expensive it is to print. So if they've got vinyl, it's like, okay, and obviously if I can afford it, because shelling out $30-$40 for vinyl isn't always something that you could do at the drop of a hat. That's kind of, especially, you know, it's kind of a purchase that you have to be ready to have made. But when I'm in a position, I do like to buy vinyl and then just keep it, and you got a piece of art right there in front of you. So that's the way it's done. For sure. But once again, Robert, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with us. Thank you everybody. Tom. Thank you everybody for hanging out with us. Really appreciate y'all, and we will see you all tomorrow.